Hi, and welcome to my YouTube presentation for LSC 535, Children and Young Adult Services, on programming for teens from 12 to 14 years old. For this assignment, I had to pick two programs that I wanted to bring to these children, explain how the programs would work, what you would need to buy to make them work, and why they were appropriate and would benefit the target group in question. So the first thing I had to do, the first part of this set of three assignments, was to consider who my target audience was. So for this particular assignment, I chose my target audience to be young adults, those 12 to 14-year-olds, who I kind of called elder children in one of my previous assignments. I'm interested in basically the transition age between middle school to high school. From my experience in libraries, I feel that this is often a group that is lost in the library. They're in that transition stage, so it can be difficult to determine what's too childish for them and what's maybe too adult for them. It should be noted that the grouping of grades changes per school. For instance, in Maine, where I'm from, there are schools that have middle school is 5 to 8, and there are ones that also have them from 6 to 8. They're in a similar respect. There are high schools that have their groupings from 8th to 12th and 9th to 12th. The reason that this makes a difference is because it all depends on where that 12 to 13-year-old is placed. Depending on when their birthday is in Maine, they could be placed with a group of students that are a bit older than them or a bit younger than them. That group. So that kind of makes a difference sometimes, but more or less what I'm trying to just explain is that there's that limbo and there's that transition point for these students. According to Know Your Clientele, an article by Steele, you can break this group into 10 to 14 as well. The definition of youth can change by library, but chances are it certainly includes 14-year-olds. So I did, again, choose that 12 to 14-year-old bracket. With this group, there are many needs to be considered. This includes social needs, responsibility needs, parental interaction, transition concerns, as I've already talked about. Digital literacy can vary. A lot of people in the field might assume that these kids are digital natives, that they know everything, and quite a few of them do. But if they're coming to libraries, coming to the classes, coming to the computer programs, they might actually be looking to learn something that they don't know or to learn something new. And it's kind of the role of the librarian not to assume that they know how to do all of this. They also have financial needs, or rather financial insecurity. There are creativity and cognitive needs, and educational needs as well, which can mean public school versus private school, homeschooling, research and homework needs. Again, in her article by Steele, Know Your Clientele, it is, quote, understanding how children develop and grow helps you plan activities and select materials that are more appropriate. Again, this is a very challenging group. Some libraries don't have the most appropriate programs for them. And Steele points out that, quote, they may feel the children's area doesn't have anything to offer them. So again, it is the job of the library or the librarian to remain important, knowledgeable, and fun. That's my personal philosophy as far as how to go about interacting with this group. So with that in mind, with all of that I had to take into consideration for this group, with that in mind, all of that background information, that background research that I kept in mind, I was able to think up two programs that I thought would be perfect for this group. So the first program I decided was a World of Darkness gaming session using just the basic World of Darkness core book. For those of you that don't know what this is, it's a role-playing game, also known as an RPG. in which participants make character sheets and play under certain in-game rules. It requires a rough script or a plot by the game leader, in this case probably the librarian, but I'll get into that. It's very similar to Dungeons & Dragons. For those of you who have not played this, again, they're both role-playing RPG games in which the whole point is for the group to work together to accomplish certain goals that the plot has set up for them. So, what would make an RPG game, such as World of Darkness, a valuable program for 12 to 14-year-old teens? We can gather the first reason from Amy Alessio in her article, Making the Most of Your Monthly Teen Clubs, which is that, quote, when librarians build a core group of teens who regularly attend programs, they can interact with them on a deeper level than they could if they only saw them after school. A role-playing game such as this requires the teen to come back regularly to carry the responsibilities of their character. Part of what the 12 to 14-year-old group is looking for are responsibilities. The responsibilities to their character could influence another teen's character, and therefore sometimes the librarian or the scriptwriter could write them out, but chances are if you have a good group of 6 to 7 people, they really should all be there, which is where scheduling kind of will come in, but it gives them responsibilities. A second reason for this sort of program is that gaming events, to quote Bremen Heger, quote, draw in a regular crowd of guys and a few brave girls, many of whom had previously never set foot in the library. By offering a twist, such as World of Darkness, over Dungeons & Dragons, we're allowing them to flex their creativity and gain inspiration from others. In addition, offering a role-playing game for teens opens a new kind of dialogue between the librarian and the teens. Most importantly, role-playing games also work on core skills. Susan Morris, writer for Dungeons & Dragons website, advocates that there are a great many reasons to share D&D with kids. Besides being just the kind of imaginative play that kids naturally engage in, Dungeons & Dragons develops an array of essential educational skills, including math skills, reading skills, writing skills, cooperation and leadership, problem solving, and creative thinking. How would a session of World of Darkness work? World of Darkness runs pretty much the same as a Dungeons & Dragons gaming session would. The difference is that there are fewer rules, and hit points, or how long you have until you pass out, are easier to keep track of on your character sheet. The types of characters you can play are also different. For example, in Dungeons & Dragons, you might be a mage, or a rogue thief, or an elf, or an orc, and there's other variations depending on which edition of Dungeons & Dragons they're playing. In World of Darkness, they could be playing a vampire, a werewolf, a zombie, a human, and they have different rules. It also gives you, the scriptwriter, more room to adapt the theme of the game towards what the teens are interested in. So while it's vampires and zombies today, it could be werewolves in 5 years, and the game has expansions and an encyclopedia that encapsulates all of that. It'd be very fun for teens of this age in particular, as this is the age when many people tend to be introduced to Dungeons & Dragons. The librarian, in this case, could be the DM, or Dungeon Master, to use Dungeons & Dragons terminology. In other words, the head of the game. However, if this were a library where programming was tight, there are two other options. The first is that the DM could appoint an older teen who was familiar with either of these role-playing games or role-playing game format in general to be the head of the game. Second is that they could make this an event that happens every other week. Once a month is not desirable for this type of game. From personal experience, what usually happens is players tend to forget where the storyline left off, and this could create a negative experience for the people in the game as well as the librarian. Initially, the first game is about making your character. There's a temptation to have the kids make their own character, and they'll have that option for those that are already familiar with these gaming types, RPGs. But since there will likely be many new players of the game, it would be better for them, it would be better to serve them to create their character with the librarian's help. For the event, if the library does not already have it, they'll need to purchase the game's core rulebook. These books also contain the character worksheets. In order to keep the children interested in the library and not overwhelmed, there should be a 3-hour cap, maybe less, with a 15-minute snack break. The reason that I say at least 3 hours, it depends on how many students they're allowing to play. If they're allowing 6 to 7, you'd be surprised how quickly time can go by between rolling for initiative, or to see what your character can do in a particular situation, or to wait and see what's going to happen, so listening to a storyteller describe locations to make it very vivid for the players. Gameplay can go by very quickly. So, depending on how many people they allow to play and how long the gaming sessions go, are going to make a difference on the gaming experience. From there, the librarian or teen in charge will be with this group and communicate through email. If a player cannot make the game, the DM can simply say they're requesting elsewhere, but again, this could have an impact on the group depending on where the plot last left off. It will be up to the librarian or the DM to decide and to gauge the team's interest level to see when the game ends and when a new one can begin. If the librarian plans correctly, they can plan a rough outline for maybe 10 weeks of gameplay. This allows players to feel they have accomplished some plot, but it allows them to move on and try something new. New players can be added on at any time, but librarians, or whoever's in charge of the group, must be careful because too many players in the game and it could barely move. 6 to 7 is a good target to start, unless you have someone in charge who is more experienced in the leadership position. You might be able to fit in a couple more. What you would need to make this kind of program work, the first thing would be to purchase the copy of the World of Darkness core manual. According to Amazon in 2013, it runs for about $20. There are also PDF options, so teens who are interested in checking out the book beforehand could go online and potentially view the text before the program begins. While there are several PDFs, a physical copy to have within the library is an excellent idea. Luckily, character sheets can be printed for free from the World of Darkness website. In addition to the core manual, the librarian may also purchase the World of Darkness Encyclopedia or any standalone World of Darkness books, including Vampire the Requiem and Werewolf the Forsaken. And that's pretty much the summation of the first program that I did. The second program is a little more basic and a little more budget friendly. I decided to start up a writing club. The writing club could probably have a witty name like the Penners or something like that. But what I discovered was that, quote, librarians do not teach reading themselves. That is the job of teachers, but literacy programs help young children learn pre-reading skills and introduce children to books and the conventions of reading. While that particular quote is geared more towards younger children, there are still certainly skills that can be established from writing groups. There's a social level involved. There's plenty of room to build confidence. There's plenty of room to build presentation skills, even just reading to one another in the club. There's room for imagination, creativity. There's room for improvement on writing skills, penmanship, spelling, formation of sentences, and grammar. In addition, quote, reading clubs are popular in many libraries, and some school libraries also organize them for groups of children. Clubs can be formed for specific pairings, or they can be built around specific types of reading, such as graphic novels, adventure, or mystery stories, according to Fasig and Holt. This is similar to writing clubs in that you can also choose many different genres. You could do a mystery theme, a historical theme, an adventure storyline. It pretty much allows you as a librarian to include the interests of all of the different students and explore their interests even further by picking a prompt of a genre that they're not entirely familiar with. A writing club seems like something a school may offer, and in fact a librarian and school could partner together to make the club more beneficial for the team. Renee Valancourt points out that, quote, the YA planning process should be conducted with full acknowledgement and support of your library or school administration. In fact, planning and evaluation can be an excellent way to keep administrators informed about what goes on in your department and why your services are essential. Whether or not a full collaboration happens between the school and the library, offering a writing club does a few other things for teens. The first is that it encourages reading from a different angle. A quote from Amy Alessio says that, quote, teens who are not big readers are sometimes creative writers, making their own stories when others do not satisfy them. So despite the collection development that a librarian does, there might be something that they want to exist that doesn't exist, and this is a potential outlet for that. A second way that creating a writing club would benefit teens is that it affirms that they are important to the library, that they can be themselves as well as knowing that they have something to say, and that they'll be listened to. A writing club could also be a great learning experience, not only for the teens, but the librarian. As Valancourt says in the later article, quote, it could be helpful to think about young adults as a separate cultural group with their own language, dress code, and standards of behavior. Like any other outsider working with a minority group, young adult librarians and school media specialists need to learn the unique characteristics of the population they serve. If the teens in this group seem to be engaged in writing activities, their needs might be being met. But if they lose interest and numbers drop, it could indicate that either they want something new from the librarian, or the schedule time is conflicting with something else. Either way, it opens a communication between the librarian and the teen's needs. Additionally, Alessio points out that, quote, a teen writing club can drive other programs of the library in the same way that the advisory board does, but with a different focus. For example, they may run open mic or coffee house nights, or publishing writing on the library website or in a print publication. Running a teen writing club will involve some icebreakers for the group as a whole before critiquing begins. The design of the writing club will be to instill creativity among the teens as well as to increase their social comfort level. Participants will not be capped, but I would recommend that they sign up beforehand at the circulation desk so that the teen librarian in charge will be able to contact them for further future meetings. It's important to know how best to notify this group early on, and they could probably use the website of the library underneath the teen page. Each session will run similarly, with icebreakers to begin and a longer writing prompt to follow, keeping the running time of the event about an hour to an hour and a half. In her article, A Year of Programs for Teens, Amy Alessio suggests setting up icebreakers such as add-on stories, Mad Libs, and fan fiction. This is a great idea as it takes away the assumption that the teens will all know each other. For example, some libraries have several branches, and some of the students prefer one over another, and some will go to several. After 2 icebreakers, which will get the ideas flowing, the teens will have a chance to expand on the idea from the icebreaker, or they'll be able to partake in 1 or 2 new prompts. the team will be encouraged to share with the group. For enthusiastic teams, there will be later options to share their works on the team's library page, or to create a sharing night, a sort of coffee house like Alessio mentions, where they can invite their parents, guardian, family, and friends. This group will meet once a month to start, unless the teams convince the librarian that they would like to meet more often. In the instance that there is an event within the same month as a meeting, there may be a second meeting in order to discuss snacks, performance lineups, and other event needs. What would you need to run an event like this, or to run a club like this? Luckily, this is very budget friendly. A meeting space is the first requirement. Hopefully the library in question has a team space or a meeting room. I'm aware that not all libraries do, but this will be the regular club space for the meetings. Writing utensils should be provided, though teams may bring their own. In the event that there is a coffee house, snacks or a raffle might be discussed, and a microphone would be needed if there was a coffee house. Those are my two programs, one more complex than the other. One requires a little more writing experience, and the other one requires a little more creative story experience. So they're sort of within the same gauge, and they're perfect for someone like myself who's an English major and enjoys writing. I hope you've enjoyed my two teen programs, and I hope that they come of some use and have stirred up some thoughts for you and for your library. And my bibliography is to follow. Have a good afternoon.